Hello, everyone. Welcome to another PCA Live 3 at 3. We have a special guest today, Nick Hammond, author extraordinaire of Around the World in 80 Cigars. Really excited to have a conversation and cigar chat with you, Nick. Welcome to the broadcast.
Pleasure to be here, Joshua. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to having a bit of a smoke and a chat. It's been a long, busy day. It's 8 p.m. at night here. So, it's perfect timing. Great to be with you.
Well, Nick, thanks again for taking the time. I have read the book and am a big fan of it. I think it's really, a great work and something, as I was talking to you before we started the show, I've been really interested in learning as much as I possibly can about cigars, about the people, the stories. What is the essence of why people enjoy cigars? What accompanies them? And this really puts a lot of those pieces together. And one of the passages from the book that really struck to me was, cigars have introduced me to people that I've never known otherwise, taken the places I've never otherwise have been. I've eaten meals, tasted wine, sampled spirits, and had conversations that would have been inconceivable were it not for the involvement of the humble hand roll. I think that right there, everyone can relate to that.
Yeah, it's so true. I was thinking about that only today, and I thought, was I hamming it up a bit? And I said, no, I really wasn't. My life would have been immeasurably poorer without it, and not only because of the rich socialization and the actual enjoyment of the cigar, but purely because of the people that you're introduced to. And you end up in places and doing things that you think, how did I end up here? No, this is crazy. It's like a magic door. It really is.
Exactly. So, Nick, tell us a little bit about the book and your inspiration for writing it.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm a writer by trade. I started work as a newspaper journalist. I worked a lot in news, and then I did a bit of business. And as it is when you get started in the journalism game, you get to learn a little bit of everything. You're a jack of all trades and a master of none. So I was on the sports desk, and then I was sent to review cinema, and then it was politics, and then it was the law courts. But of course, all of that is giving you a fantastic grounding across the real wide range of people and places and how to behave and etiquette and law and public affairs. And then what that's doing is giving you a very broad base so that you can take a big perspective, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And during those years, I worked for various newspapers, then I went to magazines, then I ended up in a bit of commerce. And all that time, I was sort of building up the contacts book, and I was sent off to do all sorts of strange things over those years, ventures I'd get myself in. And over the years, I'm in my late 40s now, and I look back and thought, well, there's not many people that have done that variety of things. Some of it really quite bizarre. How can I sort of convey that? And normally I write in quite short form for magazines and for companies and clients. I thought, well, I need to write something that's going to, give it some depth. And so I thought, I'm going to try and write, at considerable length, so I can really explain what it felt like to be in these places and how I got to know these people. And when I started to get into cigars and who makes them and where they're grown, what it feels like to stand in a plantation in Nicaragua, in Esteli, and talk to the guy who's growing this tobacco. And that, to me, is what pulls me into books or to stories. It's the way you feel that you're there. So I started to write these stories down, and they just grew. And I just thought, that's quite a good tale. And what about that time you did this? And someone else might say, yeah, but wasn't that the time you did this? And so it pulled together, and it came together as a sort of a series of chapters. And once I started writing it, Joshua, it just sort of fell into place. And the next thing you know, there's 50,000 words in the bag.
Well, it's fantastic. I also like how you describe your experiences with cigars as punctuation marks in your life. And, the book is a lot about experiences and travel, as much as it is about cigars. And how have you been holding up in a world that is limited to no travel at this point?
Well, that's interesting. A couple of people have asked me that, and my sort of travel has tended to be a frenzy of travel for a month or two, and then it goes quiet, and that in a way works really nicely because I'm quite happy to be at a desk for a week or two, but then I have to go out and meet people, and then I think I get itchy feet and I want to be going somewhere, and so I would get on the phone and I'd organise a commission with a magazine or something and wangle my way to get sent to northern France to do a story about Calvados or something, and that was great. And of course, when I was writing the book, we got towards the end, and there were a few ends I needed to tie up, and a few people I needed to see, and so I spent 2 or 3 months blitzing all over the place. It got really crazy, so I was really happy to stop for a little while and calm down. And then, of course, the book launched late last year, so that again, in the run up to Christmas, there was another frenzy. I was touring, signing, trying to promote. That was really tiring. And it got to the beginning of this year, I thought I'll have a little break. It's been a bloody long break now because we haven't been anywhere. Yeah, I'm getting a bit fed up with it, I have to admit. I'm quite good at being at home. I love my, being in the countryside where I am here in the south of the UK. And I like to fish and I like to shoot and I've got my dogs and I like to cook and bake. And, I'm quite a private person, so I don't mind it for a certain period of time. But I'm in a house with 2 daughters and a wife and 2 dogs. So you do need to get out once in a while.
Exactly. I miss the travel. I said when reading it, like you go through the different places that you've been to and your experiences, and I'm like, all right, I want to go there. I want to go there. And then you're like, all right, I'm going to go online, look at flights. And then you realize I can't go there. So,
yeah.
It's definitely a difficult situation. But I do highly recommend reading it just to, get the flavor of that experience. But in addition to the book, you've been writing for several publications, as you mentioned, for 25 years. What are some of the lessons learned that you have from those experiences?
What, you mean life lessons or cigar lessons?
Life lessons and cigar lessons.
They're the same thing, really, aren't they? Well, I think in that time you grow up and you learn your chops, as it were, at the beginning, learn your trade. And one of the things, a couple of things I learned back at the beginning, which I think have stood me in really good stead. I was one of the last guys to go through, over here certainly, the sort of traditional journalism route. So I didn't go to college. I didn't get a degree. I went straight into a newspaper and worked as the tea boy, and so the news editor would shout, "I want a coffee," and I'd have to run off and get his coffee, and then throw me a few bones of some stuff to do, and I thought it was great. And it was only just after the end of typewriters, so the very early computers that were comical, if you could see. My kids would laugh. But we learned from the ground up, and I learned how to do that. I went away for 3 months to a journalist college, which was great because I was paid to be there, so we had a great time. And I learned law and I learned public affairs and all the stuff that back then you had to know. And now I'm not sure whether they do it to such a degree. They certainly don't learn shorthand anymore. Everyone's got a voice recorder now, which is fine until it breaks down. But we had to transcribe 120 words a minute so that, the sort of speed that you and I are talking at now, you should be able to write it in shorthand, take it away, and later transcribe it word for word. And that was an important thing because you were doing court cases, and people were giving evidence. And you couldn't go to the stenographer and say, "Can I have a copy of your contemporaneous notes?" That didn't happen. So you had to make those notes and be very sure that what you wrote was what he said, and things like that. So I was very grateful for that. That taught me a lot. And then I think as I grew up, I just talked to so many different people in so many walks of life. As I said to you, I've covered stuff from doing murder reports, for example, to village fetes. I've interviewed, the Prime Minister, and I've slept on the street with homeless people to do a feature. And I've covered sportsmen after they've won things and business people. And so I got to talk to everyone, and that teaches you how to speak to people at a certain level. And for me, it taught me how to, I think, talk to them on the same level, you know, as a human being rather than a prime minister or a guy on the street, you know. And that is such a crucial skill, because then people will open up to you and tell you their story. And that's always what you're after. And still to this day, I like to meet people, find out what makes them tick. Why do they do that? What's their family like? You know, and try and get inside them a bit. And if they realize you're not trying to do that with an agenda, then I think they open up and they trust you. And then the story is a far better story for that color.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, you've covered travel, food, cigars, some of the luxury type lifestyle in your writings, among other things. Why do these interest areas work well together? And do you think that there is a cigar culture, so to speak?
Yeah, definitely. And they work well together. All of those things are part of the enjoyment of life, I think. And, you know, enjoying what's around you and not being afraid to partake in a bit of luxury, because life, I believe, is to be, you know, it's not just there to be endured. If at all possible, it's there to be enjoyed and embraced, and all the wonderful things there are and wonderful people that we haven't yet met and amazing places we haven't been to. So things like, you know, a lovely suit or a beautiful glass that's made, or you go to a little village in France and they make these exquisite little pots or something. And I collect, you know, I just grab bits from my travels from everywhere, even, you know, nothing expensive, but maybe a tiny painting on a market, or pick up a little shell on the beach that will remind me of these things. And all of that, I think, is the good life. Same with good food, good wine. It punctuates your life. As you said earlier, I think it's the same thing. You know, this cigar is punctuating our conversation. It's not the focus of it, but I'm really enjoying it, and it helps. And I think it's, you know, also a great prop. You feel a lot more expansive and maybe more confident if you've got a nice cigar in your hand. And when I talk in front of people, you know, I sometimes think, I get a bit, don't cock it up, don't get nervous. But then you light a cigar and you can talk to anyone with a cigar in your hand.
Exactly. I know it's been refreshing. I've been with the organization for just over a year now, and being able, in presentations and on stage, being able to smoke and enjoy a cigar, you don't feel nervous at all. It's very relatable. That, and I've always felt that cigars and a nice suit coat or sport jacket, those are two things that are essential if you want to have that confidence to really do what you need to do. So the book was originally published in 2019, right? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, last quarter of 20.
So, you know, has there been any experiences that have happened thus far after the book was published, or now looking back on it, that you wish you included in the book?
Yeah, good question. And the answer is a definite yes. Well, and it's very funny you should say that, because this cigar is a Casa Torrent by Alejandro Torrent down in Mexico. And shortly after the book was published last year, it was a little treat, actually, because I knew that I was going to be on the road and really pushing the book and pedaling like mad for a while. And I thought, what I'll do is, towards the end of the year, I think it was late October, early November, I'm going to get a trip sorted out. And as it happened, long story short, I was on the Cigar Journal booth. One of the people I write for a Cigar Journal. I was on the Cigar Journal booth in Dortmund, and I bumped into Alejandro, and I knew him from previously, and a lovely man. And we got talking, and he said to me, "You've got to come over and see what it's all about." Anyway, so that's what happened. He said, "Come over. We've got lots to talk about." And I was tying it in with another trip that was going on, and perfect. So I'll go to Mexico. I will do a bit of tobacco. I can spend some time with Alejandro, and then I'll disappear for a couple of days at the end, and I'll have my little reward for getting this book out there. You know, from a little picture in my head to getting it on the shelf, and you know, that was my reward to myself. So we got there, and we had a great time. Met Alejandro, went down to the San Andres tobacco fields where they grow that amazing Maduro wrapper down there. Had a good, lovely time. And this is definitely going in my next book, so it'll be a chapter, but I'll cut it short for you. But I got towards the end, and I was about to head off on a boat to this little island. And Alejandro had recommended to me this beautiful place where I could chill out for a couple of days. And I said, look, I just want to be able to sit in a hammock, smoke a cigar, maybe do a little bit of writing and just calm down. He said, Nick, this is perfect for you. It's absolutely perfect. So that afternoon, he drove me down to this little dock, and he said, let's get some lunch. And being typically understated, he said, this place does amazing shrimp, my friend tells me. I said, yeah, sounds cool. So we start driving down there. It was about a couple of hour drive from where we were. And as we were driving, there was this storm coming in. And it was just getting worse and worse and worse, the whole thing. Of course, a storm in Mexico is not like a storm in the south of England. It was absolute monsoon, tropical rain, and within halfway through the journey there was water pouring down the road, and down the centre of the road like a river. And I was thinking, wow. And then the wind got up, and all these palm trees are going, and it was quite something. There's debris on the road and swerving round rock piles. And anyway, we get to this seemingly godforsaken little town in the middle of nowhere, and he pulls up, and there is these in Central America they don't often have sort of big town buildings. It's quite often single story stuff, this low block of buildings, and one of them, which didn't look any different from the rest, he said, that's the restaurant in there. Really? Doesn't look like a restaurant. And it was pitch very gloomy in there, dark, no lights on. So we got out, ran across the road, and we go into this place. As I say, it was dark. I couldn't see what was going on. Went in. There were a couple of white plastic chairs hanging about, and that was about it. And that, everywhere in that part of the world, everyone sits on a white plastic chair, right, by the side of the road or whatever. And he went round the back, started chatting to somebody. Next thing you know, the lights come on. These two old ladies come out, talking 10 to the dozen in Mexican, and they start cooking for us. You can hear the fat bubbling. They start cooking some nachos. Next thing you know, they come out with this big pot, steaming pot of shrimp with this gorgeous red spicy sauce. And his shrimp, well, shrimp over here are like these little things. Shrimp over there are like this. And they were more like lobsters, mini lobsters. And there was just mounds of them. Bottle of tequila on the table, a few beers. And it was amazing. We sat in this place laughing, eating these shrimp, getting this sauce everywhere. And meanwhile, the storm was getting worse and worse and worse outside. And we had this tequila, and then I didn't really care about the storm anymore. So we sat there for some time, and then this little Mexican guy came running across the road in a poncho, dripping wet. And he came inside and said something, and Alejandro said, that's your captain. This was the guy that was supposedly taking me to the island. So we ran back across the road with my suitcase, trying not to get wet. We climb into this little flat bottom tin pot boat. He's got a large piece of plastic which he gives me to wrap round myself to try and stay dry. By this time, it's absolutely hammering it down and howling a gale. And he looks at me. Alejandro says, "You really want to go, man?" And I said, "I'm here now. Come on." So the last thing I saw of him, he was standing on the dock waving like this, and we putted up the little creek. And in the creek, it was quite calm. There was like a little mangrove swamp, and these egrets were flying around. And I thought, this is quite nice, really. It's quite funny, the fact that it's raining. I got my camera and filmed the guy, and I looked round, and the little guy behind me's got a plastic bucket, and he's bailing out water from this back of this boat. And I'm thinking, that's not quite so good anymore. And suddenly he goes out into the middle of this lake, because we were on a lake. You had to go across quite a big lake to get to this island. And he put the throttle down. Off we went. And we hit this water, and then, of course, the wind came. Oh, my God. I've never seen anything like it. You couldn't open your eyes because the wind and the spray was smashing you in the face. I was clinging to this plastic to try and, not take off. There were like whole trees and things going past, and the boat is going up and down, smashing down so hard that the bench in front of me splintered. The wooden bench smashed to bits. I thought, we're going to die. We're not going to get over here. So for about 20 minutes, we zigzag across this lake, trying to avoid the worst of it. And it was absolutely terrifying. And I did, sincerely think at one time we probably wouldn't make it, because if we fell overboard, which I nearly did on several occasions, there's no way you would have survived. Eventually, he ended up on this island that came out of the mist, and he managed to get close enough to get out and moor up and pull me out. And he shoved me in the direction of the hut that was there. So I just ran in, and it was, again, no lights, and there were 2 young girls in there. And they didn't speak a word of Spanish. And I don't speak a word of English, rather, and I don't speak a busting lot of Spanish. So we looked at each other and we made a bit of a, see if we could understand each other. We couldn't. I said, don't worry, I'll call Alejandro. I got my phone. Well, of course, no signal. She said, points at the lights. The lights have gone out. The electricity's gone on the island. And she gets this little key and she says, I show you up. And so she takes me up this windy road into the jungle, literally into the jungle, where there's this little wooden shack. This is my room. She opens it up, lets me in. Very nice little room, but very basic. Gauze for the windows, no glass or anything. And of course, there's no lights. So she says, thanks very much, walks back out again. And there's me in a room in the middle of nowhere with no electricity, no lights, no phone. And it's getting dark. And the trees are like going, and I'm thinking they're going to come through the roof. And I'm thinking, how am I going to spend the next 14 hours? I'm stuck in this place. I tried to go out, to go back down and say, could I have maybe a beer or something to eat? But it was too dark. And I thought, if I get lost, I'll die. So I went back, locked my door. Fortunately, Alejandro had slipped into my backpack a little bundle of these smokes, and the remainder of the bottle of the tequila. So that night, that last 14 hours, I spent sitting on my bed, fully clothed, because I didn't know when I'd have to run for it, trying not to think about boa constrictors and tarantulas, and drinking tequila and smoking.
What an adventure. Oh, my gosh. Well, I look forward to the next book and reading about that story. But in addition to Around the World in 80 Cigars, you also wrote a book on the rise of the Nicaraguan cigar. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Yeah, of course. And that I was very, very proud of. It was a book commissioned by Hoya de Nicaragua, who, as your viewers will undoubtedly know, is the oldest tobacco factory in Nicaragua. And it was 50 years old back in, I think, 2018. And I've known Juan Martinez, who's I think he's the vice president, but his family own Hoya. And I've known him a few years. We bumped into each other in Rotterdam years ago at an event, and we spent a bit of time together. And he's a lovely young man, very earnest, quiet, but nice sense of humour. And we got on really well. And we used to bump into each other at the shows and stuff, and I'd write stories about him for Cigar Journal and for other publications. And so we got to know each other quite well. And then at one event, he took me to one side and said, look, Nick, we've got this 50th anniversary coming up. We've got a few things we want to do, because it's a big deal for us. We're the oldest factory there. We want to make a big song and dance about it. And at that time, Joshua, Nicaragua had just overtaken Cuba as the world's largest exporter of premium cigars. So it was a big deal, and a real accolade for that country, having been through what they've been through over those years. And he said, one of the things we're going to do is produce an amazing cigar called Cinco Décadas for that anniversary. I said, great, sounds amazing. And he said, another thing we're going to do is we want to produce a book, and I want you to write it. And I was absolutely gobsmacked. And of course I said, yeah, I'll do it straight away. And so that was an amazing project, which involved a couple of visits, 2 or 3 visits to Nicaragua. I spent several weeks there. And with the help of the Martinez family. Dr. Cuenca, Dr. Alejandro Martinez Cuenca is Juan's dad, and the former a guy who owned the factory and initially bought it back in the 90s after the revolution. He helped me go off to meet poets and historians and cigar guys. You know, I went off to spend some time with the Plasencias, and then I went up into the mountains where all the coffee grows, and then spent some time with a German guy who started a resort up there, just to learn what it's like to be a Nicaraguan over the last few years. And I spent a lot of time talking to the workers at the factory, which was always what they said to me. We want this book to be about our people. It's not about us. It's not even about the cigars, to be honest. It's about these people, because without them, you know, we wouldn't exist. And so I got to talk to a lot of the key members of the Hoya team, and some of whom had been working at that factory all their working lives and more, in that, you know, a couple of the ladies had knocked on the door to get a job at the factory when they were 12 years old, and had stepped through the door and started because it was allowed in those days and they needed the money, and they're still there to this day in their 60s. So you're talking about 50 odd years of people working in this factory, and the things they've seen, the things they've done. As I said, they've been through the revolution, the American embargo, the whole Contra affair, you know, arms to Iran thing. They've been through depressions. You know, literally planes have come over and bombed the factory because it was at one stage held by Somoza troops, and he was the former president they were trying to kick out, and then it was taken and revolutionary troops were in there. So both sides at one stage or another were trying to blow up this place or set fire to it, you know. And you're talking about this young girl walking through the streets of Esteli, going to work with, you know, planes flying overhead and bombs going off and bodies in the streets, and they had an air raid shelter. And I mean, it's just a remarkable place, and they are such a resilient people. You know, they've been through so much. And, you know, then they had natural disasters. They had earthquake in the 90s, I think, which flattened an entire city, razed it to the ground. Then in the late 90s, the cigar boom was going on. They had a huge hurricane, which led to mudslides, and they went across Esteli and scoured the whole of the topsoil off. So it was that wonderful volcanic topsoil, you know, in a couple of nights was swept away, and there was just rocks. And you know, you think, how can these people keep picking themselves up? But they do. And I was enormously privileged to be able to sort of try and pick apart that story and write their story and tell, you know, the wider world how they felt about their job and their company and their country. And it was and it's a beautiful book. They did a lovely, lovely job in putting it together. If you ever see it anywhere or see it to buy, there's not many copies around because a lot of them have been given out as special gifts, even in you know, sort of political circles and stuff, diplomatic circles. And it's a lovely hardbound book, really beautifully made, and I'm so proud to have my name associated with it.
That's fantastic. So, you know, throughout your different experiences, you've traveled to many different cigar shops and lounges around the world. You know, what are some of your observations from those? And, you know, are there any that really stand out to you of the places that you've been to?
Well, I think the great thing about cigar spots, cigar shops, cigar lounges is, yeah, there's those that are sort of super luxury and those that go, wow, this is really cool. But you know what? I think every one has its own personality. And if you said to me a name of any of the ones I've been in, I could tell you what it was like and what it felt like to be in there, because it's just like visiting an interesting library or something to me. And each one has its own sense of being. And some of them are only a couple of chairs and a table, and you think, yeah, that's a bit rough and ready, but they're good guys in there and it's got a great vibe. And others are, you know, the height of luxury. I mean, there's 2 or 3, 4 or 5 places in London that are just beautiful. You know, for example, you can walk down St James's Street in the heart of Mayfair, and at the top of the hill, there's Davidoff of London with Eddie and Edward Sahaki, which is just a beautiful shop, and they're lovely people, and it's so much history in there. And this is a guy, Edward Sahaki, opened the shop in 1981, and Zino Davidoff was there, and he can tell you all about it. And Edward's such a lovely man, so charming and charismatic. And you walk a few steps down the hill, and then you're in JJ Fox's, reputedly the world's oldest cigar store, 220, 30 odd years old. This place where Winston Churchill went to buy his smokes, where Orson Welles, left a debt there, left his debt with them when he was made bankrupt and went to jail. And it's got something like 11 royal warrants. I used to supply cigars to the royal household. And they've got a little museum down the bottom. You can go down, see some of the world's oldest cigars. You can see Churchill's chair that he loved to sit in. And you can sit in it and have a smoke. It's just ridiculously cool. And you can see the ledgers. They said, oh, yeah, Mr. Churchill. And he bought prodigious amounts of cigars, as you can imagine. And he'd send them a letter saying something like, I'd like to buy my grandson 50 cigars, not as good as the ones I buy myself, but slightly lower grade than that. Yeah, it's just a wonderful place. And then you go down further down the same street, and there's the name of it escapes me. I'm going mad. St. James, number 1 St. James is Dunhill, the traditional home of Dunhill. And there's a Dunhill store in there now that's been sort of really fancified. So it's got a wonderful glass humidor, and there's all these sort of artifacty things around. You can go in there, grab a smoke, sit down, have a coffee, talk to Robert Emery, who's a lovely, lovely man, and he used to work at Fox's as well. And it's I always describe it a bit like sort of something from an Indiana Jones movie. There's all these like ancient artifacts and tobacco leaves, and so just in one street you can go down there and have the time of your life. But when you travel abroad, everyone has its personality, I think. And there's a little shop I'm thinking of, I don't know why, in Esteli itself. Now, you imagine in Esteli, you don't go to a cigar store generally. You're hanging out with the guys, you're going to the bars, you can smoke a lot of places. But there's a very cool little place there that when I was in Nicaragua writing this story and doing a lot of interviews, it's actually really tiring. And I'd go back to my hotel at night, crash out, and the guys would tell me where, I'd get picked up, where we're going tomorrow. And we'd have an itinerary, and might do 10 interviews in the day or something. And it actually really does take it out of you, because a lot of those interviews are very personal and quite poignant. And so you really feel for these people. So by the end of the day, I was wiped out. And then, so I went to bed one morning, and they said, do you want to get up tomorrow and go shopping for stuff when you go home? I said, no, I'm too tired. I'll get something at the airport. And then I said, what I'd like to do is get up a little later, chill out, have my breakfast. I said, I know this sounds strange, but is there somewhere I can go and have a smoke? And they said, oh, well, yeah, there's this little bar up the road. And so they got the guy to pick me up. And kindly, I had a driver who looked after me. And he said, I'll wait outside, you go in. And there's just this little cigar shop, and I can't for the life of me think of the name of it, but I'll find out for you. Very basic, but they were very friendly. They made amazing coffee, as you can imagine. And I sat in there in this leather chair, and it was aircon, because in Esteli or Managua, it's boiling hot. So that was a relief. And I sat down, and I just felt so good that I was doing this great job, but I had a bit of downtime. And I remember distinctly that I went in and I bought a Drew Estate Flying Pig. And I think it was the... trying to remember exactly the one it was. I can't remember. But it was the Flying Pig shape. And I sat down, fired up the smoke with a really killer coffee. And I just remember thinking, this is fabulous. And so that place had popped into my mind as one of the great places I've been to. But as you can imagine, I could talk to you about it all night.
I mean, it's fantastic. We have PCA, we have 3,000 plus members in the United States. That are, retail shops and lounges. And, for me, going to the different shops is much like going to a historical marker. It's like, when people go to the White House to take a picture, or they go to the Capitol to take a picture, for me, I want to go and experience as many of the different cigar shops and sit there
Yeah.
and talk to the people that have been doing it for so many years, the small business owners. And I agree with you, your comment in the book that there's nothing better than smoking a cigar in a factory. Like that is
No, there really is.
that. And then, if you watch someone hand roll it and then hand it to you, I've had that opportunity in the Dominican Republic and in Tampa. And, with that and a Cuban coffee, I mean, there's nothing better than that.
No, there isn't. You're right. And when they give you one, you're not sure whether to keep it or to smoke it on the spot. And it's a nice problem to have. And, no matter how many times you sit and watch those guys do that, and I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times, it never, ever becomes boring. If you stuck a roller in front of me now, I'd be glued to it again. It's just mesmeric, isn't it? And they are just maestros or maestras as well at their job. And also a freshly rolled off the deck is a great smoke. And it's a different smoke. It's not something I want to smoke all the time. Tends to be very strong, very young, kills your palate, but my God, is it good?
Well, and it's tough. I agree with you. When you're given a cigar as a gift, part of you wants to keep it. I have in our office, we have some humidors here, and then I have a home humidor, and I don't know whether to save them or to, enjoy it right away. And it's like, I could never answer the question, what is your favorite cigar, or what is what is your celebratory cigar? They're all, to me, it's the moment, it's who you're enjoying with it. Every experience is unique. This is a unique conversation right here. It's memorable that we're able to discuss this. And so, that's, we frequently get the question in the industry, what is your favorite cigar? I won't ask you that. I'll ask you some other questions, what your favorite preferences are. But I know that one is a tough one. The question I will ask is, what is your favorite city to go?
Oh,
where are you going to go after the travel resumes to normal?
That's a really good question. I get asked a hell of a lot what my favorite cigar is, and it's a really difficult thing to answer because I don't really have one. It's like asking which one of your kids is your favorite. I like all sorts. In terms of cities, again, I mean, they're all, all the great cities have got so much to offer that I like them all. And I think, do you know what? I think that's part of the secret of why I love what I do, and I think I'm good at what I do, is because I have this ability to have a wide Catholic taste, if you like. It's like a taste in music. I love opera, I love blues, I love rock and roll, I love classical, and to me, to be able to enjoy all of it is really sensible, because there's so much great stuff out there. Why would you limit yourself to one or two things? And when people have said to me in the past, I only smoke Cuban cigars, or Cuban cigars are the best, well, I think, well, that's just stupid. You're missing out. Why would you just only drink French wine? You'd be an idiot, wouldn't you? You'd miss out on the great reds of Chile and Argentina and the wonderful Californian whites, and then you'd miss out on the New Zealand Pinot, and it would just be daft. And I feel very similar. So great cities. I mean, London's a fabulous city. I get something from it every time I go. Paris is amazing. I have a love affair with Paris, which is everybody does. I have a real sneak for Amsterdam. I have spent some lovely time in Amsterdam. It's such a cool place. I have to say, I mean, Italy is amazing. The food, the people, the weather, my God. You can't help but fall in love with Italy every time you go there. I really enjoy Vienna. I've been there a few times and I love it. It's got such a wonderful mix of old and new and classical and modern, and they're very clever people, and they live a great standard of life. And you can hop on the tram and get like a 3-day pass for like €15 or something, which is nothing. And they've got the state opera there, which is unbelievable. And they have lots of lovely restaurants. You've got all the coffee shops. You can kick back and chill and so much history. So I've got a lot of love for Vienna. I'm not going to name all of Europe. America, I mean, I love America. America gets such a bad rap because, there's stuff going on everywhere and it's so vast. But there's so much of it. It's just amazing, beautiful. The people, on the whole, that I've met on my travels are lovely, humble people who, just same as the rest of us. They love their families. They want to have a good life. And on the whole, they're able to do so in America because, there's just so many opportunities, such a vast country, and I'm fascinated by it. I've not visited hardly any of it, and I want to do a lot more. So, in terms of cities, I just want to keep visiting them, really.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to hosting you in Washington, D.C. in the near future.
Well, let's do a sort of dinner or something, and I'll come and sing for my supper. I would love to.
Exactly. There's a lot of shops here and lounges, and it's in even our office itself. And one of the things we do in the Premium Cigar Association is fight for premium cigar rights before lawmakers, before the federal government, in states and localities. I have a feel for what's going on in the United States with a lot of the legislative action and regulatory action. Just want to kind of posit to you, I know in the book you provided some commentary about the artisanal nature of premium cigars, the distinctiveness versus mass market combustible cigarettes, things like that.
Yeah.
What are the, through your travels and going to the different countries, what are some observations that you have about the legal restrictions on premium cigars that are taking shape around the world?
Well, I think, it's just such a difficult thing to argue because as soon as you open your mouth and say the word smoking, it's almost like you've said Hitler or something. There's no winning of that argument because everybody goes, it's the devil. Well, life is not that obvious, and it's not often that black and white. There's always grey in life, I think, and I've always been very wary of extremism of one sort or another because if you're at either end of the spectrum, you're missing out on the bit in the middle, which is more often than not the truth. And a lot of the smoking laws that people enact are based on goodness, that they want, the basic premise that you want your people to be healthy is a good premise. But from there on, it spreads like this spider web and sort of corrupts and becomes this sort of, sledgehammer to crack a nut. And if you want to ban cigarettes, why don't you ban bloody cigarettes and leave the rest of us alone? But no, this word smoking comes in. And if you have anything to do with tobacco, that evil word, then you're the devil incarnate. Well, I'm sorry, I don't subscribe to that. I happen to think that smoke and the art of smoke and tobacco and the spiritual side of it and the mental side of it and the camaraderie side of it and the side of it that allows you to relax, be yourself, take some peace, take a step back from your day, getting to the zone. I think a cigar is as good a piece of mindfulness as any amount of yoga or fly fishing or Zen, and I love all those things. To me, that's what it is. So to throw that in with this different plant entirely that's chopped up, filled with crap, and rolled out of a machine by the million per day, frankly, is a nonsense. So, you go to send these guys to the factory that you're talking about in Tampa, or the one I'm talking about in the Dominican Republic, and see these people that have this thing that's come from a farm that's taken months and months and months to grow of tender loving care, has already been through 100 pair of hands and will go through another 100 pair of hands until it hits the shelf. Let them watch that being rolled. Let them watch it being aged. Find out why they do that, how they do that, and what flavors and tastes will come from the different terroirs and the regions that tobacco is grown in. And then tell me that it's the same as a cigarette. No, it isn't. And we need to remember that and be proud of it and not back down, because we're not the monsters we're painted to be.
Absolutely. And it is such a relaxing experience. And, obviously there's been a ton of challenges with the current crisis and the pandemic, but I've heard from several folks that there are new people taking up cigars and enjoying a cigar as a relaxing mechanism. And I think that that's important. It's certainly been, I mentioned I was in Pennsylvania for a month or two, and that was the leisure, that was the what kind of kept everyone sane. You would go and enjoy a cigar on the back porch after the work, after this, the stresses of life, of watching the news, seeing everything that's going on. You kind of take a step back and be very reflective. I love enjoying a cigar, when writing, when, researching, doing things like that, because it really provides that focus, and you get you in the right state of mind, so to speak. But
I totally agree with you, and it takes you out of yourself a little while. And one thing I noticed with this, when it all kicked off, and all very upsetting, of the equilibrium of your life, and you worry for yourself, and you worry for your family and your kids, and the next thing you know, your world's falling apart if you let it. Well, that's when you need some perspective. And I decided that I wasn't going to sit there glued to the news all day, because it made me feel bad. I would look at the news once a day to make sure I knew what was going on, but apart from that, I'd ignore it. I wasn't going to flick through Twitter and watch all the arguments and people shouting at each other, because I don't believe in that either. I was going to stay at home, family, and try positives of it. And for a long time, I've been talking and thinking to Cigars, based on the book, that would, allow me to use on trip and dig my contacts book, and it would allow me to, have some people who are similar visions everywhere in the world. So I used it to do that, and I don't think I would have got round to launching that podcast probably ever. But I have, because of this lockdown. And now we have Around the World in 80 Cigars, the podcast. And I talk to cigar makers and cigar friends and retailers and interesting people all around the world. And so I think that's a positive to come out of it. And I think you need to find the positive. But I agree, night, it's been a long day. The kids have been at school. We've tried to keep on full time home. And some money at a time, no commissioning any writing, pushing the book, and you think what's going to happen next month. But at the end of the day, I sit.
I think we lost Nick there. Wi-Fi issue. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this broadcast. We'll see if we can get Nick back a little bit later. Hopefully you had the oh, there we go. Let's see here.
Can you hear me, buddy?
There we go. I think there was a bad internet connection.
I think somebody had enough and pulled the plug on me.
I think the internet connection is
I think I was trying to feed down to you, John.
But we were just wrapping up anyway. I wanted to thank you very much for joining us. I think everyone, I highly encourage you to take a look at the book Around the World in 80 Cigars. And Nick, we hope the best for you, and stay safe and stay healthy during this challenging time.
Thank you.
we'll definitely check out the podcast as well.
Yeah, and same to you, Josh. I really appreciate.
Thank you.
That's kind of, yeah, really appreciate.
Take care, Nick. Thank you.